Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Tax Matters. I'm Chamaka Ohaochi. How is your week going and how is business going? Today, we are still talking TAXPRO-MAX. When it comes to matters relating to taxation, tax advisors are a veritable group in many respects, but most especially with regard to their role as points of contact with their clients. Last episode, we shared with you some of the concerns of the tax advisors with regard to TAXPRO-MAX. Our guest today, Mrs. Ben Obi, the group lead digital support group at the FRS, will be addressing those concerns one after the other. But before then, we found the clip we're about to share with you very gratifying in the sense that it indicates very strongly that the tax consultants have fully imbibed the features and the benefits of TAXPRO-MAX.
No, by way of background, the TAXPRO-MAX was developed, in line with the FRS mandate by the Finance Act to automate the tax administration system. Okay, and it is an online tax platform, okay, developed to create seamless administration of tax for both the tax authority and the taxpayer. Now, the platform provides the taxpayer with access to file returns, okay, electronically. You can pay your taxes online, get instant credit for your withholding tax deduction, okay, from income, ascertain capital allowance and losses to be carried forward, utilize your capital allowance, and of course, subsequently compute your income tax, generate your tax clearance certificate after you have made your payment. You can respond to tax assessment raised by the tax authority. You can keep track of your, outstanding debt, okay, as a taxpayer as well as tax authority. They are also monitoring it, and then of course, you can communicate with the tax authority on the basis of the facilities on the TAXPRO-MAX. Now, the taxpayers are expected to register with the FRS to grant them access so that it's like your bank account, so that you can access it and relate with the tax authority. And then by the time they give you, grant you access, you can even do reconciliation of your outstanding withholding tax credits, your losses that you are available for carry forward, the capital allowance you have that is available for carry forward, all of those you can view on the system. And that is why before you file your returns now, you must, being the first time, you must go and reconcile, all those items in terms of credit notes, in terms of losses carried forward, in terms of capital allowances carried forward, with the tax area tax office, so that it can be uploaded into the TAXPRO-MAX.
Good, very good. Now to our guests. Joining us on today's episode of Tax Matters is Mrs. Chiaka Ben Obi. She is the group lead digital support group of the FRS. Mrs. Ben Obi, welcome to Tax Matters.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm glad to be here.
It's good to have you on the show, ma. We must commend the service for the deployment of the TAXPRO-MAX tax administration solution. Now, I would like to know how far so far?
It's been a challenging journey in view of where we're coming from and how large the corporates are. But so far, so good, I would say. We have cooperation from many of our large corporates, and most especially our board and top management, which makes it good for any change to be implemented. At the same vein, we have some resistance, but with the cooperation that we are getting with the major stakeholders and the sponsors, we are happy in the development so far in adopting the solution.
Okay, ma, that well said. We'd also like you to rate the acceptance of the TAXPRO-MAX by taxpayers, tax consultants, and also the staff generally.
On a scale of 100%, I will give it 60%. Right, so for a solution that was deployed just in December 2020, And for us to have achieved that level of acceptance rate and usage rate, I believe it's a success story, and we are making improvement by the day, especially in resolving the issues, the challenges, and the questions coming from the tax-paying public, as well as our tax officials that are doing the administration part of it, or playing the administrator role on the solution. Yes.
We are opportune to talk with some tax practitioners, tax consultants, and they raised some concerns with regards to the TAXPRO-MAX, and we would like you to address some of these concerns. They raised some concerns with regards to the fact that the TAXPRO-MAX does not give provisions for companies exempted from paying companies income tax while filing. Example, companies that are being granted pioneer status, and also companies that are exempted from paying minimum tax.
Okay, first and foremost, what is even the origin, or what's the motivation behind developing TAXPRO-MAX internally? We realized that previously, most of the solutions we've gotten off the rack and implemented with external service providers, there was always one shortcoming, one gap or the other, which were fundamental. Such complaints that were coming from our taxpayers, even from the tax officials, made us to be running what we would call a semi-automated system. And that's not what we wanted. We wanted a full automated system whereby we can start capturing the life cycle of a taxpayer from the day they register as a taxpayer up until they request, because ultimately we want to request for their tax clearance certificate. Over and above that, when they pay for their for the tax liability, they want to be able to issue the receipt. They want to also, for that receipt to be because it's a transaction, or especially the withholding tax, they want to be issued their credit notes, which they will use to offset their corporate income tax when they file. So that life cycle, there was a need to capture it automatically and even to pay without the interference of tax officials. That is the way a proper tax administration system should run. Over and above that, payments that the taxpayer is making, what raised what process, which is assessment, before getting to that final figure that you have established a liability for the taxpayer. So that means that for any taxpayer to make a payment, there has to be an assessment. That payment has to be tied to an assessment. One, it makes you confident, it gives you confidence that this assessment that the taxpayer is paying has properly been documented and the taxpayer is paying what they are supposed to pay. Now, when it goes to your specific question about not allowing minimum tax for those who are supposed to be granted minimum tax, as well as those that have pioneer status and all that, both of the challenges and both issues are just on profiling. So it requires a lot of taxpayer education, not just on the side of the taxpayer, but also on administrators. For example, when the taxpayer was registered in the system, how did the tax administrator profile them? That is what we call account officer in the bank. If they profile that company as a pioneer status, certainly it will have that relief when it files their tax. The same thing on the minimum tax. Minimum tax, depending on what they set as a commencement date. When it was manual, a company whose commencement date was probably 10 years ago can't claim that they haven't commenced business. But now it's automated, so you enter your commencement date. If your commencement date you entered is above the time limit for minimum tax, it will of course compute your tax that you're supposed to pay. So it is that profiling, the setting, what date did we put as commencement date so that minimum tax can also be computed. Because it's automatic, you know, the system is not speaking to anyone when it is making those calculations, because the rules has been set, you know. So that, but it is there, it is captured. Many taxpayers who understood this, or many tax administrators who have set the right profile for the taxpayers are not complaining. It's just those whose commencement date had been set wrongly that are experiencing that difficulty. But with more information, our tax officials are knowing what to do.
They also raised the concern of the TAXPRO-MAX not giving them access to view unutilized withholding tax credit. What can you say about that?
Again, it's a gap in communication because every taxpayer has a credit report. When they log into their profile, they will have access to their credit report. When they open their credit report, they will see the different credit reports that are there. One is the withholding tax credit note, another is the loss relief. They also have VAT, so it is there in their credit reports.
Now, they also raised the concern with regards to no provision made for insurance companies on the TAXPRO-MAX because they have a peculiar filing process.
Okay, not just the insurance, it's also some specialized sectors like aviation. It's also involved in this particular, that we didn't go live with them when we went live with the other sectors. But as at last Monday, I'm glad to tell you that insurance, life and non-life, have become operational and they can file.
That's good to know. Very commendable, ma.
Thank you.
Okay, ma. They also raised the concern that it doesn't allow or it doesn't make any provision for filing back year's assessments for companies' income tax.
It does. However, the taxpayer cannot do it on their own. You know, just like if they're filing for current year, they can do it on their own. They will have to contact their tax offices to guide them on how to file for back years.
Now, I remember a particular tax consultant that raised this issue that it doesn't give them room or opportunity to file for multiple clients, in the sense that it only gives them access for a username and a password. They can't file for multiple clients. Is this true, ma?
To an extent, it's true, in that I think what the consultant wanted was to have one login, and in that login they can then file for their different clients with, you know, just one login. Now, when we tried that, we experienced a lot of errors. What were those errors? The consultant who is making these returns sometimes will take the return that belongs to ABC and complete it for CRS, and they make the payments thereafter, and then they come back to us, oh, they made an error, so they need to correct them and all that. And that was when we opened the system to allow them to file for multiple clients. So what we then did was to say, each of your clients has a separate TIN number, has a different name, has a different profile. So the login details for each client will have to be provided to you by the client, and you can log in and file for them. So in that case, there is no issue of saying, oh, I made an error in making these payments for company this when it's supposed to be company that. So today, and that's why I said it's a yes and no. Today, the consultant can file for multiple clients. However, they have to use the login details of each of their clients.
Now, they also want the TAXPRO-MAX to create a room or a provision for them to be able to sign for tax consultant and also tax for auditors on any document that they...
TAXPRO-MAX is not an auditor. So there are set rules for auditors to actually certify the statements of the different companies. What the TAXPRO-MAX is doing is just to take whatever it is that they have signed for them to enter it into the TAXPRO-MAX and then do it. But they've already done it. They've already gotten the stamps and the sign and all that of their auditor. So TAXPRO-MAX is not going to do that stamping for them because it is not an auditor. However, we agreed a workaround with the tax consultant, and that workaround is to accreditate every consultant that is making returns on behalf of their clients, which we are working on now. And then once that is done and those tax consultants have been accredited, as you log into the system to file for your clients, the system will authenticate once you enter your agent's ID or something, but we're still working around that to get it done.
They also request that they could always have an evidence of any filing made.
You know, there is no system, even the greatest system in the world today are still going refining. Before we went live, in December 2020, we did what you call the user requirements and captured the requirements from our tax officials, from our taxpayers, even from the consultants themselves. And then also using the law, how does the law back up these requirements? That's what we implemented. Now, that doesn't mean that having gone live now, we won't continue to refine the requirements of the users. Now, those users may not know those requirements from day one. For example, when you register today in TAXPRO-MAX as a new taxpayer, an email is triggered and goes to your account to give you your login details and all of that information. It was a requirement that was captured from day one. Now, the new requirements which they want, which is on submission of the returns, they want to have an email triggered to. It gives you an immediate on-screen acknowledgement of your submission today. But I can understand the taxpayer wanting an email, just like an email that gets triggered when they register. So it's a new requirement. But as for acknowledgement, they do get acknowledgement, but that acknowledgement is on screen. It does not trigger email. The only thing we have to do now is to incorporate the requirement to say trigger an email and send to the mailbox of the taxpayer, which we will do. We've taken that into consideration.
Now, we also like you to enlighten our viewers on the capital allowance computation, the rate. They also made mention that there's a little bit of confusion or controversy with regards to the rates.
What I've had is to say that they're applying different rates or they're not applying the right rates and all that. FIRS did not define the rate today. Okay. The rate is captured in the law. Now for assets, when you get to enter your asset details, the first thing it asks you is if there are two categories of assets. Is it tangible? Is it intangible? So let's take the case of buildings. For buildings, for example, depending whether it is commercial or whether it is, personal building or something, the rates are already defined. Two types of rates that are defined by law, which is what TAXPRO-MAX has implemented. And that is the initial rate that is applied and then the annual rate that is applied. Now, the initial rate for buildings, etc., is about 15%. And then the annual rate is about 10%. So it is what the taxpayer enters. And I'm not saying that the taxpayer is not like, sometimes we make mistakes, we are human, but your human error should not be translated to system error. It is what you enter, they say garbage in, garbage out. It is what you enter in the system, that is to say, what you're telling the system that the system responds with. So it's just to be careful on what they're entering. We've seen cases of having entered certain information and then the taxpayer going to the next screen and realizing that that information they entered was wrong. They now go back to go and change that number or something. But haven't changed that number, you have to make sure that you go through the schedules again so that you can commit those new entries. It's only when you commit those new entries so that if it comes to the final computation, you have the right liability coming out. But so then when they don't go through and accept and submit before getting to the final computation that has the liability, they now say, oh, the system is not doing the right corrections. But it's what we enter that we get.
Oh, okay. But I would also like to know what has been done in the area of the remittance with regards to transaction made in foreign currency, the rates concerning that.
First and foremost, there are two issues raised with regards to foreign transactions. Whatever the currency of transaction that is used is what we return in the withholding credit notes. We've had complaints like, that the transaction was in foreign currency, but the withholding tax credit notes was in Naira. That is not correct. And I'll be very happy to resolve that issue if a taxpayer can just give me one instance and we can verify that instance. It does not happen. Whatever the currency of transaction is, that is what we'll take in, and especially the withholding tax. The withholding tax that has been remitted. If it is in USD, the credit notes that we generate will also be in USD. So it's always in the currency of transaction. Just also saying we can't all take 10 fingers in one mouth at the same time. We have achieved a significant amount of progress in the seamless payment of liability from assessment in Naira. We have not done so in foreign currency. We are not a payment gateway. We are looking for a payment gateway to partner with that can deliver. It's still work in progress with them. We've had a couple of service providers claim that they can deliver the foreign currency aspect of the integration. When we test, we realize that they are not able to deliver. Now we paused in continuing that integration until we stabilize the environment of what we have implemented, until we reach that level of reducing the current challenges, which we believe, many of which, just like you've asked me for certain clarification now, many of which is maybe lack of communication, and it could be from our side. Nigeria is a big country. We don't expect the information to get to every taxpayer at the same time. Even if it gets to the taxpayer at the same time, the level of assimilation may not be the same. So we want a situation where we have stabilized, the environment, and then we can then start with those integration testing again. So the foreign payment aspect is still work in progress.
I would like to know what steps is the service taking in enlightening and educating taxpayers, tax consultants on the use of the TAXPRO-MAX to clarify some of these concerns they are having.
One of the steps to enlighten the taxpayers on the TAXPRO-MAX usage and adoption is you and I talking now. Is Tax Matters partnering with FIRS in disseminating this information and reaching out to some of our tax consultants and some of our taxpayers. And we've seen many of your episodes talking to the taxpayers. So that's one step. Another step is also the tax radio. We've also published manuals that we've sent to different sectors of the tax-paying public. And those manuals are available in electronic media, which makes it easier to just send it to someone, that is making inquiry and all that. But, for example, when we started, it was an uproar, it was chaotic, but now it's coming down, which means that our message is actually going out. We've engaged different sectors, different, like Chamber of Commerce. We've engaged different professional bodies like ICANN, ANAN, CITN. We've engaged Lagos Chamber of Commerce. We are engaging many of the MDAs in all our government business tax offices. They've been getting all the MDAs in different states and then educating them, especially the payment schedule officers, who are really the ones that are sending the payment schedule to the bank, to educate them on how they will raise the payment reference numbers as against the payment schedule, which they will not take to the bank. So we're reaching out, we're exploring all avenues to reach to the taxpayers and the tax consultants. We have established what we call situation room as far back as early parts of June. And what we did was to put different support levels. We're trying to grow competencies in every office so that we don't centralize support in the head office. So we have a TAXPRO-MAX focal officer in each tax office. So any taxpayer or tax consultant that is having any manner of issue with regards to using TAXPRO-MAX, their first port of call should be their tax office. When they call the tax office, they should ask for the TAXPRO-MAX support person or focal person. Now that TAXPRO-MAX support person we call our first level of support. If they're not able to resolve the issue, they will escalate to the second level of support, which is regional based now. So a collection of tax offices within a region has one dedicated support person attached to that region. When that person, who is a subject matter expert, is not able to resolve it, it can then escalate to the third level, which will now be the development team. But what we find, I have even turned to a help desk with regards to TAXPRO-MAX because people are calling me directly. But when they call me directly, I respond to their issue. But it's more effective if they go through this support structure that we have put in place. It deepens skills across all tax offices instead of trying to centralize it in the head office. We don't want a situation where supporting the taxpayers is centralizing the tax offices. It's very inefficient and very ineffective because you'll not be dealing, just few people dealing with so much issues coming across the country. So that means that the rate of getting back to the taxpayer to resolve the issue will be lengthened, and we don't want that to happen. So you should just trust us. Start with the tax office, your tax office, which is your like account officer, and then that escalation will go from there. But we've never received any issue on TAXPRO-MAX, on the usage of TAXPRO-MAX that we did not resolve within 24 hours.
That's very good.
Thank you.
There you are. TAXPRO-MAX is the way to go. Embrace it. Thank you for watching. See you next week.